$11,900. That's what the median American home cost in 1960. Not adjusted, not indexed, the actual sticker price. And the median American family that year earned $5,600. 2 years of income bought a house. Not 5, not 7, 2. Today that ratio sits above 5 to 1. And if that number makes you a little sick, stick with us because it's just one of the 10 greatest things about the economy in the 50s that Americans under 40 have never experienced. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your parents' generation felt like the American dream was a reasonable expectation and yours doesn't. Every number we're about to walk through comes from the U.S. Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Federal Reserve, or peer-reviewed economic research. The 50s weren't perfect. No decade is. But the economic conditions of that decade produced something Americans no longer experience. A middle class where one paycheck was enough, where owning a home was routine, where retirement was guaranteed, and where the phrase saving money actually meant something. 10 things that made that possible, starting with the biggest one. Number 10. This is the one thing that makes every other item on this list matter. In 1950, one paycheck supported an entire family. According to Census Bureau data, roughly 71% of American married women were not in the labor force in 1950. That's not a statement about what women should or shouldn't do. It's a statement about what was economically possible. A factory worker, a foreman, a shop owner, a mid-level clerk could earn enough to feed, house, clothe, and educate a family of 4 without a second income. The 1950 median household income was $3,300. On that income, the average family owned a home, a car, saved money, and took an annual vacation. That's not because the money went further in some magical way. It's because housing, education, healthcare, and food all cost dramatically less as a share of income. Today, the average dual-income household, 2 adults working full-time, struggles to match that standard of living. The 50s economy did not require a household to run at maximum capacity to survive, and that's what has been lost. Number 9. Back to that number I opened up with. In 1960, the median American home cost $11,900, and the median household earned $5,600, a price-to-income ratio of 2.1. According to Housing Almanac data, the current national ratio sits above 5. And in coastal metros, it runs 8 to 12. A mortgage payment on that 1960 median home, financed over 30 years at 4% interest, was about $57 a month, around 12% of median monthly household income. Today, the median mortgage payment consumes more than 33% of median household income, and that's before property tax, insurance, and utilities. This isn't just about home prices rising. This is about the ratio between what a house costs and what a family earns collapsing so dramatically that the mathematical possibility of home ownership on a single working-class income no longer exists. That's the story of the last 50 years compressed into 2 numbers. Number 8. A brand new Chevrolet in 1950 cost $1,510. A Ford Custom the same year? $1,511. Adjusted for inflation, those cars sell in today's dollars for around $20,000, which sounds close to what you'd pay for a new economy sedan now. But the comparison misses the point. The median household income in 1950 was around $3,300. That means a new car cost roughly 45% of a family's annual income. But a family only needed 1 car, and the interest-free lot payment plan was standard. Now, I want to be fair to the counter-argument. The American Enterprise Institute has published data showing new vehicle prices in the Consumer Price Index have stayed roughly flat since 1995, while wages have risen. That's true, but it's an argument about the last 3 decades, not the last 7. And it doesn't account for the fact that in 1950, a factory worker owned his car outright inside of 3 years. Today, the average auto loan runs 68 months. Number 7. In 1950, tuition at the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League school, was $600 a year. That's about $6,000 in today's money. Penn's current tuition and fees run over $64,000. That's a tenfold increase after inflation. And Penn is one of the more affordable Ivies to compare because their tuition archive is public. State schools were even more accessible. The GI Bill covered up to $500 a year for tuition and books for World War II veterans, which was more than enough to cover full tuition at most public universities. Nearly half of all college admissions in 1947 were veterans. The idea that a summer job could pay for a year of tuition wasn't a fantasy in 1950. It was the norm, and that meant a generation of working-class Americans became the first in their families to earn a degree without debt. Number 6. If you opened a Passport savings account in 1955, your bank paid you between 2 and 3% interest, and thanks to Regulation Q, a Federal Reserve rule dating to the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, that rate was legally protected. Inflation during most of the decade ran around 1 to 2%. Do the math. The average American saver was actually gaining purchasing power just by leaving money in the bank. Compare that to the last 15 years, where the national average savings rate hovered around 0.06%, while inflation ate anywhere from 2 to 9% a year. Wait, it gets better. In 1955, roughly 7.5% of household disposable income was saved. Today, that number is close to 3.5%. A generation that earned less nominal money still walked out of the decade wealthier because saving actually worked. Number 5. In 1950, the average American household carried around $533 in non-mortgage debt, less than 2% of median household income. Today, that number is over 40%. The 50s were functionally a cash economy. Credit cards didn't exist in their modern form. Diners Club had launched in 1950 as a novelty for business travelers. Layaway was more common than installment financing. When the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances first began tracking household balance sheets in 1949, the household debt-to-income ratio for the entire country stood at around 30%. And most of that was mortgages. Compare that to the peak of 120% reached in 2007, right before the housing crash. A 1950s household didn't just have less debt, they had almost no debt, and that meant their paycheck actually belonged to them. Number 4. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked factory earnings in May of 1958 in Bulletin 1252. The average production worker in American manufacturing was earning roughly $2.11 an hour, about $4,200 a year. A factory job funded a home, a car, a stay-at-home spouse if the family chose it, and a modest annual vacation. And this wasn't specialized skilled labor. It was assembly work, machine tending, packaging. The jobs required a high school education at most, and they came with union protection, health insurance, and a pension. Union membership peaked in 1954 at 35% of the workforce. Today, that number is 9.9%. A high school educated worker in 1955 could realistically expect to reach the same standard of living as a college educated professional. That equation has not existed in the American economy in over 4 decades. Number 3. Between 1948 and 1979, hourly compensation for the average American worker and total economy productivity grew in near-perfect lockstep. Worker pay rose about 93%. Productivity rose about 97%. That data comes from the Economic Policy Institute's analysis of Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. What that means in plain English, when the American economy got more productive, workers got raises. The relationship was severed sometime around 1979. Since then, productivity has grown roughly 90%, while typical worker compensation has grown only around 30%. Wait, it gets better. Because in 1950, that pay productivity coupling wasn't an accident. It was the outcome of unions, wage regulation, tax policy, and a policy consensus that broad prosperity was the point of the economy. A factory worker in 1955 got a raise every time his plant got more efficient. That is a lived economic reality no American under 50 has ever experienced. Number 2. In 1958, per capita health spending in the United States was $134 a year. A production worker earning the average wage covered it in less than 2 weeks of shifts. Today, per capita health spending runs nearly $14,000, and the average family health insurance premium alone tops $24,500 a year, more than the entire annual income of a 1950 factory worker. And that's before deductibles. The Commonwealth Fund reports that in 19 states, median income families now spend more than 10% of every paycheck just on employer-sponsored coverage. In Louisiana, that share hits nearly 16%. In the 50s, employer-provided health insurance was a small deduction that covered your entire family, and a doctor's office visit cost around $2. Getting sick did not bankrupt your household. Today, medical expenses are involved in roughly 2/3 of personal bankruptcy filings in the U.S. That is a change measured not just in dollars, it's measured in the psychological weight every paycheck now has to carry. And the number one, that was my drum roll. 1950, roughly 25% of the private sector workforce, around 10 million Americans, were covered by a defined benefit pension plan. By 1960, that number had climbed to nearly 50%. A defined benefit pension is not a 401k. It's a legal promise from an employer to pay you a specific monthly income for the rest of your life after you retire. You didn't manage it, you didn't rebalance it, you didn't worry about market crashes. You worked, you retired, and the checks arrived. Today, only about 15% of private sector workers have any access to a defined benefit pension, and most of those are grandfathered arrangements winding down. The 401k, which replaced the pension for most Americans, was originally designed as a supplemental savings tool. It became the primary retirement vehicle because pensions were dismantled, not because they failed. Now, we want to be fair to the counter-argument. Economist John Cochrane wrote in the Coolidge Review earlier this year that real GDP per capita is roughly 3.7 times higher today than in 1955. He's correct on paper, and the American Enterprise Institute has made similar arguments about consumer goods being cheaper today. What both arguments miss is that GDP per capita is an average, and averages have exploded in a decade where the top 10% of earners captured most of the gains. What the median American experienced in 1955 wasn't what the median American experiences today, even if the aggregate national number is bigger. A rising tide doesn't lift all boats if the tide rises inside a walled harbor. If you're a homeowner over 35, you may already have the security this video is describing, but your kids may never see it without a serious structural change to the American economy. If you're a buyer trying to enter the market right now, understand that the numbers stacked against you are not because you failed. They're because the system that made the 50s possible was deliberately dismantled. And if you're a seller or an investor, understand that the underlying demand pressure driving housing values is not suitable when an entire generation cannot afford the payment. The next video we're working on will get into exactly how that dismantling happened and what specific policy shifts pulled it apart. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so the next video lands in your feed the moment it drops. And watch this one next. We'll see you next time.